windows shattered. While everyone else on the staff ducked for cover, Joseph Goebbels never even flinched. He just brushed the broken glass off his notes and continued reading his speech as if nothing had happened. He somehow remained.
Hi, Andre.
Hello,
How are you?
I'm doing well, thank you. Long time no see.
I know. You only come for the World War II items. I want you to come
Yes,
to ancient stuff too. How's life in the fast lane of Europe?
yeah, and also this is way more convenient time to be honest. So, some of the meetings, which are later, they're 10 p.m., 12 p.m. my time. So if I work, I cannot really. I mean, sometimes I was joining them, but it's late. But this one, it's in perfect time. It's 6 p.m. for me, so it's awesome.
Oh, nice, nice. Okay. Yeah, I mean, yeah, tomorrow is at 4. You won't be able to join, but if you can join, I will try to create an earlier ones. But during the week, we all work too. It's hard.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's such is the nature of uh, time zones, basically global world. I mean, it's okay. This is still awesome that I can join from time to time because
Mhm.
before probably you were doing local meetups in person, or so at least now I can join them sometimes,
Yeah,
which is still nice.
yeah. All right. Talking about this man today. God.
Yeah. So yeah, I really am interested in this more contemporary because I don't consider it history to be honest. I consider it as a precursor to what we have today. So these events led to what we have today because ancient history. I mean, a lot of things has happened since then, so they don't influence our life that much.
Correct, correct, correct. Yeah. I mean, you guys are getting vaccines there or not yet?
It started 2 weeks ago.
Which one, Pfizer or Sputnik? I'm sorry.
So we have multiple. Some are Sputnik, some are AstraZeneca. So
Oh,
Pfizer, we
don't
don't have
take
any
AstraZeneca.
Pfizer, but
Don't take AstraZeneca. I heard that
yeah,
there's
yeah, yeah. I mean,
blood clots. I just took
so the
Pfizer.
reason why we got it, probably some other countries stopped using it, so our government took it, so they can say we have vaccines. But so basically, yeah, only one option, Sputnik.
I heard that if you inject Sputnik, you become to love Putin immediately. He injects his love in it. You're gonna be
I know some.
Vladimir. Oh god.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting this vaccine diplomacy. We don't. So instead of them doing independent research so everyone can get vaccinated the best, they stop their vaccines, they do propaganda, basically this vaccine good, that one bad, whatever. So it's kind of, we are in a lost at the moment without really good information what's going on.
Yeah, yeah, that's true. Let me just send out the email, tell everybody we're live. I was even actually thinking of moving it because we have another one tomorrow. 11, wars of Israel, or the Israel's, the wars that Israel was involved in, starting from all the way back to biblical times to, 1967 war, 1973 war. So it should be interesting. And just before I want to throw a disclaimer, but I'm Jewish, so again, obviously I'm in the not, not supporting anything that Mr. Not Mr. but let's just say a person like let's call him JG, Joseph Goebbels, represented, or any of his propaganda. I got blocked from Facebook because I posted it saying that history meetup was going to talk about JG, Joseph Goebbels, and I got blocked. And I'm like, why? Why did I get blocked? And they said that this potentially is a terrorist activity. I was like, how is it terrorist activity? I'm a Jewish man talking about the history of people we shouldn't be following, like Trump, like Joseph Goebbels. This is the type of things that people should know about. I'm not trying to represent anything that he represented. And obviously had two uncles that died in World War II. My grandfather. I've lost a lot of people, and obviously not supporting him. But we still need to understand the personality of Joseph Goebbels, because he was such a, I guess, big part of Hitler coming to power, and therefore how can the people be fooled like that? There's an interesting aspect of it.
Probably their algorithm just sees the name or picture. So this picture has a swastika on it, so maybe it scans it and says, okay, this is suspicious activity. I don't think they have that improved. Like, okay, who posts this and why and all these reasons. They just scan the image, scan the text, and if some set of words.
They only didn't let me go live for 1 month, but after a month, I mean, obviously I'll be more careful from now on. Whenever I say like a word like Napoleon or Caligula, I would just do something with C and Y, or I don't know, maybe somebody would think that talking about the history of Stalin would be also offensive. He killed just as many people as well. So there's a lot of things that
sorry to be late. In a word, who is protesting?
Nobody's protesting. I just can't go live on Facebook because they saw his name, and the algorithm put me out saying that.
I see. Goebbels.
Yeah, exactly. I'm thinking that if there's somebody's last name Goebbels, the guy probably cannot be on Twitter, Facebook, or YouTube. So better change his name.
I suspect that everybody who was called Goebbels changed the name already.
Right, but then,
yeah, I was going to ask that. Is it a common name? Do we have some German people here?
Listen,
because I have no idea how often this happens. Joseph is probably common name.
Joseph, yeah, but so is Adolf, right? A lot of people called Adolf, both in Germany and anywhere else, And again, this was prevalent, like Rosenthal. That's the last name of Jewish people. But there was another hater was named Rosenthal. He was just as bad as Goebbels. And so you're gonna ban everybody with the last name Rosenthal? I mean, that's so stupid. How is that algorithm working? I'm not trying to promote him. I'm Jewish myself. I'm trying to show people that propaganda is a bad thing, and we're not going to study these people. And there's plenty of videos on YouTube, and books are being sold on Amazon. Why don't they block them?
you know that late night host on the television, who's African American from South Africa. He was saying that when he was in South Africa, Hitler was a perfectly acceptable name, and some people named their kid Hitler without knowing the ramifications.
After the war or before?
After the war. I mean, he was saying that actually this guy was a DJ, and he danced and things, and they discovered that that's not a good name to have.
Right. So I'm just gonna meet a couple more people, and then in about a couple of minutes we'll start. Let me just send out email to everybody. Susan is here, Greg is here, Lan is here. Well, James just spoke, Andrew. Who else? Stephanie's here. Who else? Okay, that's it for now. Let me just send out the email. I might be banned from the Hotmail too if I send it out. I'm careful. All right. So again, today I'm going to be like it's going to be more like a free, because I have 3 presentations, back to back next week too. And then, I have another one presentation is, we're doing a presentation on Israeli 11 wars of Israel. And basically we're going to take it from all the way from, the revolt of Maccabees to 1967, 1973 wars, with 1973 war with particularly with Egypt, 1967 war, and all the particular wars, 1948 War of Independence. So should be an interesting one. Next week we have history of gunpowder, history of American Cup. If anybody interested in sports, sailing, Anne is going to be presenting. And then I believe Sunday we're switching to history of Africa, and the first one we're going to do is history of Nubia, and particularly 2 cities, Nabata and Naroyo, which was the old kingdom and the late kingdom of Egypt, if you wanted to look at it and in the timing, distance of it. Nubia was under the Egypt. I guess it was, some of the there was some Nubian pharaohs also. So it would be an interesting subject matter if anybody interested in the ancient history of Africa. So I'm going to start little by little, and I'm going to be admitting people as they come. People are running late a little bit, but so today's subject matter, we're talking about Joseph Goebbels. All right, so the Joseph Goebbels was the minister of propaganda of Third Reich. And basically that's where he spread his Nazi messages. He is basically single-handedly responsible for the, converting the German populace into Nazi ideology. And what's interesting, at the end of the war, which we'll get to that, he actually served as a chancellor of Germany for 1 day before taking his life and killing his family. And what's interesting is particularly we wanted to understand exactly how he manipulated the minds of nation with the fake news, Nazi idealized books, propaganda, films. Films were big, and we'll talk about it today. Joseph Goebbels, brainwashed the entire, whatever you can think of. German people were mostly intelligent, and and then also destroying through his lies, a lot of his, enemies. And so we'll just dive in, first into his quotes before we get to his early life. So his most famous quotes, let me just move this thing. Sorry, guys. Most famous quotes: faith moves mountains, but only knowledge moves them to the right place. I guess, it's, harmless at this point. Man is and remains an animal. Here, a beast of the prey. There is a house pet, but always an animal. Okay? And, particularly he refers to, several ethnicities as, we obviously he considered, Slavs slaves, and then he considered them to be Untermensch, which was subpar humans, and no place for us Jews, obviously. Then the most compelling and the most interesting quote he had: "A lie repeated 1,000 times becomes a truth." Oh, wouldn't that be referring to our former president? Propaganda works best when those being manipulated are confident that they're acting on their own free will. So it's another lie. And the last one, not the least, we shall go down in history as greatest statesmen of all time, or as the greatest criminals. Well, we know it ended up being the greatest criminals, right?
Yeah.
And he was obviously a coward, taking his own life and killing his children, who makes him the most gruesome human being that you can think of. And please, none of the things and none of the traits of personality I'm gonna point out that contributes to his glorifying is mostly negative. All right, so biography. Joseph Goebbels was born in 1897 in the city of Reit, which was an outskirts of Dusseldorf. His father, his name was Fritz, was working actually as a clerk at the candle factory, and the mother was a housewife because he had four siblings. There's five of them in the beginning. So basically, he was not a very particularly robust child. He didn't have a robust childhood. Whenever his siblings would run around and play, he would always stay in the corner, and there was a reason for that. Initially, parents didn't have a lot of money, but they still have enough money to send him to the old boys Roman Catholic high school. But what's interesting, he had a lot of disabilities. One of these disabilities was he was born with bone marrow disease, where his foot never properly developed, and therefore it caused them to have a club foot. And also, after a very expensive operation that his parents paid for, tried to even out his feet. One of his feet never grew, and he became pretty limp. On top of it, he had a lot of problems with lungs and always got sick. So he decides to hit the books, and it was his only way to kind of get into control or be in power. He was a power freak in that regard. So he was a very sickly boy with a short leg and about 5 feet yay high. So reminds you of somebody, Napoleon complex. Here we go. So he grew up a very angry, person because of the fact that he had a lot of physical disabilities, and he thought that life was very unfair. And and basically, he decided to go into World War I. Obviously, when he went through the physical exam, they told him, "I'm sorry, you're not qualified. First of all, how are you going to be running in the trenches? It's one leg is shorter than the other, and you have lung issues." And as you know, what the war was shown, and I don't know if you guys know, during the World War I, Germany was a lot into soldiers were considered to be sitting on a morphine a lot. Like, for example, Goering was consuming morphine, and a lot of the soldiers, it was very prevalent, and physical movement was not really a type of thing that was involved in World War I during the Kaiser. And what's happening is, on top of it, there's a lot of gas attacks. That was at the time there was no Geneva Convention, and they were using a lot of the gas during the trench wars. And issue was, whenever somebody with a lung disease, they knew right away that that person won't survive. You have to be physically fit to be in the World War I, and probably taking a lot of morphine. They overnight, they were almost like zombies. Anybody any questions? Go ahead. Anybody have any questions? Or again, the way that we have here is I'm welcoming any kind of additions. Usually I have presenters, but sometimes when I don't have presenters, I just volunteer myself to present things. Today we're supposed to be talking about 1940 France, so I supplemented with this. So please, if you have a question or you want to add something, please do. Okay. So basically, he goes into University of Heidelberg after the old boys high school, and he stays in school for a long time, almost a career type of activity, and then he becomes a doctor of philosophy. He became a doctor of philosophy in 1924, and in 1922, what's interesting, initially he was opposed to Hitler. right? And when he saw Hitler speak at one of the rallies, he was mesmerized, and he entered a Nazi party in 1922. Particularly, he was, interested in the nationalistic ideas of Hitler, and what he represented. And at the same time, he also, didn't like Jews at the time. That was the thing. But what's interesting is he didn't like Jews, but he didn't mind Russians. Let me tell you what happened at the time of 1920s, 1926. As we know, there was a Great Depression and around that, time, and a lot of people were out of the jobs. Also in Ukraine, there was a lot of pogroms against Jews. So the Jews moved from Ukraine to Germany to look for an opportunity for work. And the first thing you do as a Jewish person, you go to the synagogue and you say, listen, do you have any jobs? And Jews obviously helping each other, let me find you a job here, let me find you a job there. So a lot of the Germans that were out of work was looking at this camaraderie of Jews helping each other and, settling, even almost you can think of immigrants, even though Hitler was himself an Austrian and didn't really have German citizenship, but, it's neither here nor there at this point. But so there was a lot of hatred toward the Jews that came from Ukraine and, tried to make something of themselves in Germany. And, he picked up on it. He basically was like, you know what, I could make something out of that. So in 1924, Hitler appoints him as a part of National Socialist Party, director, district administrator. And he progresses through career pretty fast. And sorry, anybody has any questions or? Okay, no, right. He progresses through career pretty fast, and in 1927, he actually finds his own newspaper, and newspaper is called Attack, and newspaper represents a Nazi party. Okay, so it basically writes all this incredible articles about there's a rally here, rally there. And now Hitler is even more mesmerized, and he's also in love with Hitler. And particularly, he's creating this myth of Hitler being almost like a god figure, okay? So he's publishing this, he's in charge of publishing posters, propaganda pieces, and stuff like that. In fact, when Hitler was in prison, he was the only one that actually went to Berlin and was doing all these posters. But he was very smart. The way he had the propaganda is he would post his propaganda pieces or his posters on the Jewish businesses, so that people that already hate Jews and now they see, okay, well, we don't have a job, but what if we see there's a poster out there that promotes this hatred toward the Jews, and we see them really enjoying themselves? Why don't we, attack Jewish business, stuff like that? So he became basically in control of propaganda machine. And he was given several roles within this propaganda machine. So he was in control of, after 1935, he was in control of, newspaper, radio, theater, literature, music, arts. He became a figure to be feared, especially by Jews who were, in crosshairs with Nazi parties. So in 1932, Adolf Hitler, basically organizes a boycott of the Jewish businesses, and Joseph Goebbels helps him with it. The following year, they organize the burning of, Jewish book. I mean, not any books that basically don't coincide with the Nazi party ideology. For example, initially you would think that the first books that were burned was Karl Marx, Rosa Luxemburg books, Friedrich Engels. I mean, those are communist ideas. And as we know, obviously Goebbels, or Nazi party didn't like, communists. But why burning the Victor Hugo books? what does Victor Hugo and D'Artagnan, a French, writer, did to you, or Romain Rolland, or Werner Hegman, or Arnold Jouet, or Ernst Bloch, or Franz Bosch. Those people had nothing to do with communism. Why burn those books? And the fact was, in fact, what happened is initially when he became a doctor of philosophy, Goebbels, he wrote, you would say, like a storytelling book called Michael. Basically, it was the plot of the story is, or the story that he wrote, or the book that he wrote was, a member of Communist Party, basically turns into becoming, a Nazi, and basically there was kind of an expressionist novel that he wrote, and I don't know if anybody ever read it or not like that. So I want to talk a little bit about the family of Goebbels, and obviously Joseph married Magda Richel on December 19th, 1931. Magda, prior to that, was married to the Gunther Quandt, and I had one son with him. They totally had 6 children together, 5 girls and 1 boy. So let me talk about Magda Richel. You can see her last name could be misconstrued as Jewish. Actually, her stepfather was Jewish, and there was a satirical newspaper that was put out after Joseph Goebbels married Magda, that actually her stepfather was her father, and he's marrying a Jewish lady. So it was an interesting aspect of it. And basically, on top of it, Magda actually was dating a prominent Zionist while she was dating Goebbels in 1931. And the interesting fact is the Zionist name was Victor Chaim Alasorov. Okay, so he ended up, subsequently moving to Israel, making Aliyah, and he was, he was killed in Israel. But he initially set up a lot of kibbutzim around the area. So she was dating this young Zionist while dating Joseph Goebbels, and this Chaim Arlasorov one day showed up at Magda's house and wanted to kill her, basically saying, "How could you be dating this Nazi party? They're causing all these problems against the Jews. What are you doing?" And in fact, they said that if she wouldn't have met Joseph Goebbels, she would have been guarding. I mean, at the time, would have been guarding kibbutz against the against the intruders with a gun. She would have been married to the Zionist. So that's an interesting fact. I just wanted to open up for a little bit of questions. If anybody has any questions or want to
I have questions on this last part, actually. I'm a little bit confused. So did he just pretend to hate Jews, or because how did he went out with her? She's because wasn't he against that? So if she was dating another Jewish person, my opinion of the Nazis would be that he would consider her a scum person, and he wouldn't date her. So
Right.
I'm a little bit confused by this.
So she ended up ending the relationship with this Chaim Arlasorov, and that's why he came to kill her. He basically showed up at her house and wanted to kill her. And she said, "No, I'm going to go with the Nazi." So she wasn't, and again, 1931, that's Nazis. Just, you could say it wasn't a beginning, but it was definitely an initial to intermediate stages of the Nazism. So therefore, Crystal Night didn't happen yet. Night of the Long Knives didn't happen yet. So the hatred wasn't, that public yet. But they already kind of internally hated each other. So she ended the relationship with Chaim immediately after, Joseph. I don't think Joseph Goebbels knew that she was with Chaim. Otherwise, that would have been trouble. They would have never married her. But he knew about her stepfather and a Nazi newspaper wrote an article about it, that he's marrying a half Jew. And I guess at the point that he didn't, he just pulled and also she was married before to a different, there was a multi-millionaire, which has, Gunter Quandt, and Gunter Quandt became very prominent and rich, selling uniforms in World War I to, Kaiser, not Kaiser, for the world effort, for the World War I effort to Germans, and that's how he became rich. And her idea was she was getting alimony, she was getting child support from him for one child, and then she was totally pissed about it, and she was like, I'm gonna marry a Nazi because I believe in this ideology. But what's interesting, the way she met Joseph Goebbels was very interesting. Joseph Goebbels is not a stupid. He was very intelligent. He loves theater, and he was in one of the theatrical performances, and the person that brought Martha to sit next to him was, son of Wilhelm, the Kaiser. I forget his name. It was Prince something. He brought her and set her next to Goebbels, and that's how they met. And he saw a blonde hair, blue eyes lady, and he was completely mesmerized. He was like, I want to marry this lady. I guess, love prevailed. He didn't mind. She wasn't Jewish. I mean, her stepfather was Jewish, and she was dating a Jew. But at that time, I guess, and I don't know what the answer is, Andrew. Sorry.
You clarify actually a little bit, because if he didn't know, then I see it happening. So it's okay.
I'm sorry. So that's basically it. So let's talk about a little bit of personality of Joseph Goebbels before we're going to get into this. So initially, why he started to hate the Jews, right? In his earlier life, he fell in love with the Jewish lady who was, who basically told him, listen, she was half Jewish, but said, you're penniless, you don't have any money, so you can't marry my daughter, father said. And, because of that, ending of the relationship, and moving on to the, first he was in opposition of Hitler and Nazi party. He, became very passionate, cool and sarcastic and witty orator. What's interesting is, like I said, since he had so many disabilities, he was very intelligent. He has a doctorate degree. He's extremely smart. And anybody that spoke to him said that he mesmerizes you pretty much immediately. He could gain the attention of listeners through careful psychological calculation. Personality, he's like he liked nobody. He's liked by nobody, and runs the most efficient Nazi department. And then we'll get to that as well. But I just want to get through his personality a little bit. And then 1 second, I think I jumped it a little bit. Yeah. All right. Sorry. So what's happening is, before we get to the Nazi party progression, since he was in charge of the movie industry. So if you think of it, what was the best propaganda you can think of, right? Movies, right? You had Hollywood and you had German movie conglomerate, and the name of the movie conglomerate was UFA, which is Universum Film Gesellschaft, which is basically short of UFA, and they were rivaling at the time. So he completely took it over. And in 1927, he started using the movies to propagate Nazi ideology. Like, for example, in 1927, there was a movie that came out that's called Metropolis. And if you guys are familiar with Nazi ideology, there was one ideology program that they threw. It's called Action 4 program, where they're into euthanasia, euthanizing of disabled or terminally ill people. All right, like you would think of a Dr. Kevorkian of action toward disabled and ill people. I mean, even worse than Dr. Kevorkian. They were killing anybody who had a dissent. So the plot of the movie of this Metropolis was, so that was completely Goering's doing. Was basically I'm sorry, the movie's name was not Metropolis. The movie's name was I Accuse. I apologize. And the plot of the movie was a doctor at the peak of his career gets married to a beautiful young woman, only to find out that she's been diagnosed with MS. Back then, there was basically very little treatment for that. So right now, it wouldn't be considered to be terminal or a life-ending type of thing, but at that time it was. So this means that if he married this woman, or he already married this woman, and she's dying a slow and painful death, she begged him to give her a lethal injection so she could put out of her misery. She could be out of her personal, her misery. So here, through a movie, he's trying to say, look, this Action 4 program is a good thing. If people are dying, or they have a terminal disease, or they have disability, why should they suffer through life? Let's end their life in kind of like mass production, mass type of, obviously it's wrong and ungodly. And he just kind of like sneakily tried to use his ideology through movies to say, listen, let's use euthanasia. So in this movie, this doctor now, he's struggling with decision, but ultimately assists her in her suicide. Gives her whatever, cyanide capsule, whatever he does. And so this movie, even now, if you watch it, it's called I Accuse. It's very dangerous because it's promulgates dangerous ideology of kind of Kevorkian type of action, where it's okay to end life even in a person is dying. Let's help him. Or if the person is disabled, let's help him. Stuff like that. So
I have to, may I ask, I mean, it's a general comment, but it's always surprised me how fast things seem to ride, how fast the Nazis actually got control. I mean, it's 1924. It's only 11 years before he's made Gauleiter, that etc. He's only, it's 12 years since he's managed to get all this. So outside of the thing with the chronology we're talking about, how was there much? When did the unemployment begin? I guess I'm sort of, can you put some other dates in? What else was happening on these dates on the
Sure. 1929 was a Great Depression.
Yeah.
Unemployment began right after the World War I, but then during the after the World War ended and up until 1929, it was actually an economic boom in Germany. But the problem is that they had to pay a lot of reparations. During the Versailles Agreement, that was struck, I think was, and Greg can correct me, is 1919, right? I don't remember. Versailles Agreement, when this was struck, there was a very heavy penalties that were thrown at Germans that they had to pay. And eventually they start printing money like there was no tomorrow.
Right.
So the Deutschmark, due to inflation, became really worthless. They were showing pictures where you could buy a loaf of bread for 5 trucks of Deutschmark currency.
I'm very familiar myself with the inflation, partially just because I'm in foreign exchange.
Correct.
But it was the inflation which was sudden, and there were some good people around those days, including Gustav Schlessermann, who unfortunately, I guess, died in the war in that period. And he was the guy that tamed the inflation. And he was very much in favor of better relations with other countries.
Correct.
How it turned on so quickly is almost, excuse my being a little confused about it.
Well, I'm showing to you that what he used as a propaganda. You know, movies were used. This UFA, which was a movie industry in Germany, it was rivaling Hollywood at the time, was used to promote Nazi ideology. And it was not direct, like, you know, just let's kill all the gypsies, Jews, and disabled. They were using, you know, actors and actresses that were very talented to promote this message. You know, there was documentary, I don't know, and we'll talk about it. There was documentary about eternal Jews. So in 1939, when Germans invaded Poland, Jews were put in the ghettos after the Germans conquering the. And so what happened is Joseph Goebbels goes to Poland with his camera crew and creates a documentary. So look at all these Jews, they're living in filth in these ghettos. They're dressed in rags. They, you know, they don't belong in the society. They don't really follow according to the societal rules. They're very filthy. They're like rats. Let's just kill them. You know, like that was his message. Basically, when he came to Germany with this message, also the same thing he did with Russian soldiers, where, as you remember, 3.3 million Russian POWs ended up in German hands. And he did the same thing. He traveled to, all the, concentration camps. And the way Russians POW were stationed is they were in the open field. And the way that you would think of the camp was structured, you had a barbed wire, and you had gunmen on their posts and the open field. And absolutely no food was given to Russian POWs. And in order to get food, you had to exchange your personal belongings to get a little bit of bread so you can survive. Half of the Russian POWs didn't survive the war. It was a very small ratio of people that came back that was unharmed or didn't die after. It was only half that really. It was because of the Soviets didn't sign the Geneva Convention. Hitler, and particularly Goering, with his ideology, when he went to do a documentary against Russian POWs, look what communists did to this. He's basically doing a documentary against the Russian POWs. That look what look what communists did to this Russian people. They live in a like subpar humans. But it was Germans doing it. They put the Jews in ghettos. They put the Russians in this, you could say, inhumane conditions where everybody was dying by, because they said that they didn't sign a Geneva Convention. We can do whatever we want. And there was even one time that one of the German commander's wife was shrinking Russian commanders' heads. But the way Goering approached this whole propaganda, he didn't particularly targeted Russian people. He targeted the commissars, the communist ideology leaders. He said whenever there was leaflets that were thrown at Russian troops, and there was 20 or 30 million leaflets just in the first 6 months of the war were thrown on Russian troops saying, give up yourselves. All you're doing is you're promoting this, commissars and communist ideology. Give up yourselves and rebel against them. That's the way that Goering approached it. He didn't promote hate against Russians. He promoted hate against the commissars, communists. He was very smart about it, the way he approached it. I don't know if I was able to answer your question. So you would think of up until 1929, and until 1929, it was a Great Depression. And that's when Hitler, basically appointed unemployed Joseph Goebbels as an administrator for a Nazi party. And that's when he opened his newspaper of attack. Okay. Anybody else? Any other questions now? So let's just talk about a little bit how did people perceive. Let me just come back to the UFA, which is the movie industry of Germany. which was run by Joseph Goebbels. So he was in control of this whole situation, but he was kind of like a Harvey Weinstein of a German movie industry. Okay, so one of the actresses, her name Annelies Ulig, testimony against Joseph Goebbels, saying that she had a starring role at, let's say, a movie at the UFA studio in Germany. And one day, Joseph Goebbels approached her and said, listen, let's go for a drive, talk about the movie. I want to talk to you about certain ideas. And instead of taking her for a drive, he took her to his compound, offered her a drink. One thing led to another. He forced himself on her. She started kicking and screaming, leave me alone. That's not gentlemanlike. What are you doing? She got free. And he basically said, listen, if you're not going to meet my demands, what I need, okay, I will make your life hell. And he sure meant it. So this girl shows up next day for her starring role, and the movie got canceled. In fact, he put her on a blacklist of things. So he didn't just promote the Nazi ideology through the movie. He also gained the personal advantages where he took advantage of young actresses while being married to Marta and having several kids. Talking about Magda, his wife, he had an affair with this girl her name is Lida Barova, who was a Czech actress who worked for a German, who was an actress in this UFA movie industry. And she was an incredible good actress because she was such a good actress that he fell in love with her and wanted to leave Magda for her, and went to Hitler and said, listen, I know you're promoting me to all these posts. I helped you become the Reich minister, in 1933, whatnot. We won all these votes, but I wanted to end my public, figure and personality, and I wanted to marry this girl, Lida Barova, and I wanted to move to Japan, to be maybe an ambassador to Japan through, Nazi Germany. So Hitler had none of it. He goes, listen, first of all, you married, you have kids, and also you didn't want to lose him because he was an important part of the Nazi party. He was their propaganda minister. So he goes to, listen to me, give it 3 months. And if it doesn't work out with Magda, your wife, you can go ahead and leave, with your, Czech actress. And then he approached Lida Barova. Hitler approached Lida Barova and said, listen, this is a peculiar situation. I'm going to buy you one-way ticket to Prague, and you're going to disappear. And you're never going to bother, Goebbels, again, okay? Joseph Goebbels is married, has, his wife. I don't want to lose him. He's my most important politician. Get the F out of here. And he basically bought her one-way ticket to Prague, and she left. So let's just go a little bit of the timeline. So in 1924, he joined the Nazi Party. 1926 May.
Just 1 second, a question.
Go ahead.
So, because first of all, how are these things known? It sounds like very like a story.
This Goebbels had his memoirs, and also had written all these things about that as well. And I'm sorry? You're breaking up, my friend.
Did this create some? Yeah. Now, okay. So I have basically because he was a smart person. Didn't he realize that Hitler chased her away, and did this cause some tension between them?
Yes, that's what I'm coming to. So Hitler now hates him, basically, and after he appointed him to be, Reich Minister of Public Enlightenment and Propaganda, he basically said, listen, you are not showing me any loyalty. You basically, was trying to run away with this actress, and I need somebody who can dedicate themselves to a party. Hitler himself was not married. He had a public girlfriend, but they were not married, because he was married to the state. So you expected the same from him, especially that he was already married too, to Martha. So, instead of having an affair, why don't you dedicate yourself to the state and help me win more votes and help me become, chancellor? And so Hitler started hating, Joseph Goebbels, and Goebbels now needs to come up with something that would get the favor of Hitler. So what he does, he comes up with the, basically how to point, how to make Jews even more hated. Then, he comes up with all these theories, and we all know, blood libel, all that stuff against the Jews, and and in I believe in 1933, hold on a second, he basically, and I'm talking about Crystal Night. So in hold on a second, when was the Crystal Night happen? Okay, 1932, Joseph Goebbels organizes the Jewish businesses boycott, okay? And then I believe in 1937, after the Olympics, he organizes the Crystal Night, where they destroy all the Jewish businesses, and it's all Joseph Goebbels doing, inciting Hitler's hatred toward Jews even more. So now we have to take it public. Let's, focus away from this, me, you hating me. Let's go ahead and point our hatred toward the Jews. And he was very successful on it. Like I said, he would, throw documentaries. He would show Jews as being Untermensch, which is subpar human beings, and stuff like that. So in 1936, and 1939, eagerly pushed advancement of Germans to as proponents of Germany making its territorial claims. So what is a territorial claims, right? I'm sorry, 1938 was the Kristallnacht, which is where all the Jewish businesses were destroyed in Germany. So the German making territorial claims is basically saying, the Sudetenland territory of Czech Republic was theirs, and obviously Paris and England and French appeasement of Hitler let him declare Sudetenland as being German. So he, seizes that from Czech Republic. Then he has a claim against Poland and Danzig Danzig area. So he claims the Danzig area, and then he attacks Poland in 1939. Then he also says, well, we could kind of like now go into Russia. And obviously it was only in 1941 they attacked Russia, but his idea was we could resettle all the Germans in Russia, because Russians are considered to be, they could be just enslaved by us, and Germans have no, Jews have no place in this world, but the Slavs are going to be our slaves, and we're going to resettle all the Germans into the territories of Ukraine, Russia, and all that stuff. And what's interesting, in 1941, before attacking Soviet Union, he wrote an article that he wanted to be published in the communist newspaper in Germany, underground communist newspaper in Germany, where he praised Stalin, saying the Soviets and Germans are such friends, we're incredible friends, while the German troops were gathering their troops around the area of Brest, around the area of Brest and in Litovsk, where they basically attacked. he threw this article to divert Stalin's attention from the fact that they're gonna attack Soviet Union. That was sole Joseph Goebbels doing. And when they're about to, post that article, instead of giving it to German people to read, he actually bans the whole newspaper that same day. But Stalin already got the first copy and read that, even though they're amassing troops, and Stalin knows they're amassing troops at Brest-Litovsk, it's still, sorry, I'm just admitting people. It still is a problem where they kind of saying, listen, we're not going to attack Russia. We're gonna go into Britain instead of Russia. This article shows that we're friends, basically. Even though when they were internally talking between each other, they basically felt shame that Hitler had an agreement with Stalin, and particularly felt that this agreement should be stopped immediately. And by attacking Russia, they will put that shame to rest. It was very shameful for them to do business with Soviet Union. So that's that. So now, like I said, he was causing the significant part in causing Kristallnacht. In 1942, he continued to press the final solution to Jewish question to be carried forward as quickly as possible. So let me just tell you how people perceived Goebbels from his surroundings. So sorry, anybody have any questions or want to ask anything or? No. All right. How the Goebbels is basically perceived and through his surroundings. So the harshest description of Goebbels was by Hermann Goering, who was the commander of Air Force. And this is how we refer to Goering, is that Goering is the club-footed fanatic, forced women to submit to him. He influenced Hitler to become an anti-Semitic more than he was before. God knows what that evil influence he had on him. So basically, people from his own surrounding, I mean, you're talking about Hermann Goering, talking shit basically about Goebbels, because of the fact that people even within the German party hated them. So let's just get on to see what else we can talk about. So let's just talk a little bit. Like I said, he did publish a book in 1926. It was the only book that was semi-successful, called Michael or Michael. That was I said it was a communist converting to the Nazi ideology. All other works were not successful. So by him burning the books of other writers outside of communist writers like Rosa Luxemburg and Friedrich Engels and Marx, was considered that he was just he thought they were superior writers to him, and by burning books in 1932, he was showing that he was jealous of their works, and that's why he was doing that. Okay, let's just move on. All right, we talked about it already. We talked about it, right? Already. All right. All right. Okay. So let's talk about a little bit about his speeches. His most famous speech that he gave was in February 18, 1943. Gave his famous speech of secret weapon creating impregnable fortress. Okay. And also in 1944, named General Plenipotentiary of the total war. And this is a part of his speech. It was a moving experience for me, and probably also for all of you, to be bound by radio with the last heroic fighters in Stalingrad during our powerful meeting here in Sports Palace. They radioed to us that they had heard that Führer proclamation, and perhaps for the last time in their lives, joined us in raising their hands to sing the national anthem. What an example of German soldiers have set in this great age, and what an obligation it put on all of us. Particularly, entire German homeland, Stalingrad is the fate's great alarm call to German nation. A nation that has the strength to survive and overcome such a disaster, even to draw from its additional strength, is unbeatable. In my speech to you and the German people, I shall remember the heroes of Stalingrad who put me and all of us under a deep obligation. So what was the pretense to the speech? In 1942, Stalingrad is named obviously after Stalin, was the outpost, of Russian defense against Germans, and they were able to beat Germans at their game. And General Paulus, who was actually promoted to the field commander, General Paulus, was seized by Russian troops. And what's interesting is, at the same time, Stalin's son, Jacob, was seized by Germans. And the way Joseph Goebbels portrayed it, he said, listen, look, Russians are losing already. And he basically totally told the lie to German people, said, Russians are losing. We have Stalin's son, Jacob, in our camp, in our concentration camp, and he's spilling all the beans. He's talking about Stalin. He's talking about all the fortification. We're about to win the war. They just lost Stalingrad war. I don't understand, why is he talking about Jacob? And they also, the lie was, they said he's spilling the beans. The way it happened is, they approached Stalin and they asked Stalin if there could be an exchange done from General Paulus for Jacob, the Stalin's son, and Stalin refused, saying, we don't exchange soldiers for generals. That will never happen. Even though it was his own son. We can talk about different, Stalin, but Joseph Goebbels completely switched around, said, you know what, Jacob had, spilled the beans and they're losing the war. We already have his son. And what happened is Jacob takes his life by throwing himself at barbed wire in one of the concentration camps and dies because of the, shameful, obviously he didn't spill any bills and he committed suicide because he knew that, it was an important ideological Joseph Goebbels idea. And we know General Paulus was released in 1953, and he was a very sickly man and wrote memoirs about Stalingrad. And they're not particularly memoirs that people could follow, because Germans lost and you have a losing side writing memoirs. That's not really something you can look at. So let's just move on. Controversy. So speaking was Goebbels' main town. He won the Nazi Party with a speech he wrote. He even gained the attention of Hitler. Shortly after meeting Hitler, he became his biggest supporter. Eventually, Hitler appointed Goebbels. Oh, a second. I'm just going to admit somebody, sorry. Eventually, shortly after meeting Hitler, he became biggest supporter. Eventually, Hitler appointed Goebbels head of German media, which I already spoke of, leaving him in charge of everything that had to do with media. And according
yeah, I saw him. Really? Yeah. No, his car is there. And he's going to be parked in two spots. There was a spot next to him. I did not park it because he parked in two spots.
Madhu, can you mute yourself, please? Hello? Okay. So eventually Hitler appointed Goebbels head of German media, leaving him in charge of everything that had to do with media. This includes propaganda. Propaganda is a difficult matter because we can never be too sure about whether or not it's factual. It's surprising what people will say in order to get people on their side. For example, Joseph hated the Jews, that is a fact, but he wouldn't always state the fact that in his speeches or other propaganda. It's obviously worked too, but how far is far when you begin to stretch the truth? So as I've stated before, he said, if you mention it several times, the truth, the lie becomes the truth, basically. Propaganda is still widely used. Joseph Goebbels is a well-known propagandist expert. He was one of the original people that practiced this skill, and he was very unique. There's nobody like him in the current war. He was the minister of propaganda. Where do we have an official post that says a minister of propaganda? Due to that, a lot of people take after what he had done and try to copy it because he was so successful. The reason the spark controversies within propaganda itself, it is all factual. Just because Goebbels was working for the government when he made all of this propaganda works doesn't mean he wasn't lying. This could still go down today with our government, our media. What made Joseph Goebbels as good as his job, according to Robert Pierce, because it was his understanding of psychology. He knew that people needed not just bread and circuses, but something to believe in. And he gave them Nazi ideology. Legacy. There's no denying that Joseph Goebbels hated Jews. He did whatever he could to get them out of Germany. He saw them as swine instead of human beings. Some people have the theory that most of the people in that era got their personal hatred of the Jews from politics and Goebbels himself. Goebbels believed that the Jews stood in the way of Nazi revolution. He might have been pushing anti-Semitism to win over Hitler, but obviously personally did not like Jews. He viewed Hitler as basically as God, which makes sense why he didn't at all, positive media toward him, because he believed it in himself. Okay, legacy. Like most of the Nazis, he didn't believe he was doing anything wrong when he was to blame for the murders of millions. He thought what he was doing was important for the historical movement. He does not stand alone. Thousands of other people share the blame for this awful genocide. When he was started and starting to die down, people began to realize the lies that filled Goebbels' propaganda. The one truth believed in his work will always be himself. One day the lies will crumble away of themselves and the truth will triumph once more. So he basically, also said. So impact on World War II. Let's talk about a little bit of impact on World War II. During the Joseph Goebbels propaganda was full of display. He turned the battlefield losses into victories. I just told you, when in Stalingrad, Germans lost, and not just lost, their whole army got surrendered. Their field marshal, which has never happened in the entire German history, surrendered. Paulus would surrender to Russians. He would still raise the morale of the Germans by turning the losses into victories. And I just gave you an example of this speech. And basically, he would ask, even during the dying days of Germany, for children, women, and older people to rise up and commit the total war. Otherwise, there'll be total alienation. And people stood up. There was a German youth that during the 1944 and 1945 fought on the side of Germans, and they were barely out of junior high school or even right out of the grade school. These kids were fighting in the German, and he was able to do that. All right. So obviously, all right. So Goebbels wanted to rid Germans of Jews, and he wanted everyone to know. His goal was a racial purity. Kristallnacht was one more step toward reaching his goal. After Kristallnacht, Goebbels was appointed to a position that was right below Hitler as far as the power is concerned. So when that whole situation with Martha happened, where there was a hatred toward him, Goebbels, from Hitler, he decided to destroy Jewish businesses. And as he was destroying Jewish business, he was a large benefactor of the final solution, where 6 million Jews had perished in the concentration camps. Basically, his whole idea is he just wanted to be liked by Hitler. That was his whole idea. Before Germany invaded Soviet Union, it was Goebbels' job to send out misinformation and make people believe Great Britain was the one getting attacked. And I just gave you an example where he threw an article praising Stalin, praising Soviet Union, that they're such a great pact between them. And he gave that article to the communist newspaper in Germany that were about to be published. And Stalin got that newspaper on his desk in 1941. But what people don't understand is people thought that Stalin was completely unprepared for the war. That was not particularly true. If you look at the Stalin's itinerary from June 21st of 1941, when Germans attacked, he met 90% of his day was dedicated to meeting Field Marshal, Generals Zhukov. He met with the the Russian ambassador to Germany, different attaches that dealt with Germany. He read through different reports. They were all toward the fact that we're about to see the Germans going to attack. Yeah, he did believe Hitler a little bit, and all this disinformation that Goebbels threw down made Stalin believe, even though he was preparing, that they're not going to attack Russians, they're going to attack British at the time. And it has 90% to do with Goebbels. So what happens? Now, 1945 comes around. Russian troops that are outside of Berlin, right about to attack, bunker with Hitler and Joseph, Goebbels is hidden in the bunkers. So what happens is Hitler says, listen, you will be my chancellor if I die. And Hitler obviously takes his life. Eva Braun, they both, die, and unsuccessfully, troops tried to burn their bodies and didn't really burn it, didn't cremate it all the way through. And there was some gas left. And, Goebbels requests one of the guards to listen, we're going to die, the day after Hitler dies, we want to die as well. And if there's any gas left, let me go ahead and, take my life, take my wife's life, take my kid's life. And then you will basically burn us in the outside of the bunkers. And so what happens is, initially they wanted to kill their kids. They had 6 kids, beautiful kids. And so what happens is they requested one doctor who was the Hitler's dentist, to do a morphine shots to kids, Montes and Joseph, Goebbels' kids, and he refused. He goes, I'm not going to perform it. So then they requested a second doctor to do the same thing, who injected morphine into kids. They fell asleep. Then Magda, who was a, obviously, Nazi party, fanatic, his wife and, their mother put this, cyanide capsule in each of the kids' mouth and made sure that it's crashed and the kids died. And then, went out for a smoke. And the next day, Joseph Goebbels shot her and then requested, to get shot by the, and then before he was getting shot, he wanted to also make sure that, he gets shot second time. He got shot twice, and then he was cremated by the guards, and everybody else, was trying to break out into the, was about 70 kilometers to the Allies, section, because they didn't want to get into Russian hands. So Hitler died, and Goering was, his, loyal puppet, died, killed his kids, and because he didn't see his kids be part of the, current government and living without Nazi party. Oh, that's basically what I have. Sorry, guys. Sorry, it wasn't clear or anything like that. I supplemented.
That was very comprehensive.
Any questions? Any additions? Anybody want to say anything?
Yeah, very interesting. Yeah, I didn't know a lot of details, so thank you for research.
Yeah, I mean, the lie repeated 1,000 times becomes a truth. Ain't that the truth? I mean, we're talking about current president. I mean, not current president, prior president, former president. How many times he went on Twitter and said, over and over and over, people believed him.
No, I mean, that's what I was thinking earlier. I mean, I've read numerous books of fine. You know, about 30 years ago, there was those two books, Ordinary Men and Hitler's Willing Executioners. You can read them, but I just never can associate. That's the problem, perhaps.
Yeah, it's crazy. First of all, you could see clearly he was a crazy, unstable human being. Maybe initially, obviously he was a doctor of philosophy, and you can present, but he was really disturbed by the whole fact that he was, he had disability and he was raised in anger. Probably was abused by his, siblings. Who knows? And probably wasn't liked by a lot of ladies prior to meeting, Magda. That was his whole Harvey Weinstein moment in UFA, which is the movie industry of Germany, and he wanted to sleep with all these young women, young actresses.
Yeah, Zach, I was just going to mention the one, if anyone has ever read his diaries, I think it goes from sometime in the 30s to 1941, and then it picks up again in 45. They make an interesting read, and it shows Goebbels to be a smart guy. He's no dummy, and even though he was twisted mentally, just from what he did, and with the regime, and convinced that it was the end of the world with the end of Hitler, that he and his wife didn't want to be in a world without Hitler, and nor should their children be there. It's just rather amazing. But one thing that's always struck me about him is that I think 1944 speech with a total war, and I'll never forget, he's saying, he's at the top of his lungs, "Wollen Sie totaler Krieg?" Do you want total war? And the whole crowd goes, "Yeah." I'm thinking, well, you're going to get it. He meant it in a different way. He meant it as, total effort, so to speak, not total destruction of Germany. But the irony just is for me, is palpable.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, and there was an interesting fact that between the Nazi party, they were kind of making a joke, saying, look, we could pretty much right now jump from the bridge and all these people will jump with us. This is crazy how much power we have. We have obtained this power, and he is a big piece of it. People that speak to him, they say he's an incredibly intelligible and very, very personable type of guy, and he would really make you do anything, for the Nazi party. And this was absolutely. And then where do you get a minister of propaganda? There's no such post anywhere in the world that ever been. This is the first one ever. So that was unique type of post that he ran with it, and he did the most of it, obviously. And he said it correctly. If we fail, we're gonna burn hell, and that's what he said. His speech saying right here, we shall go down in history as the greatest statesman of all time or the greatest criminals. That summarizes everything. He knew what he was doing.
Yeah, that's the problem.
He knew what he was doing. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, do you know how many people worked under him? Because I'm trying to, so when a country does propaganda, this is basically he had a ministry. So I wonder how important was he personally? Obviously a lot, but how many people worked for him? Are there any famous propagandists from that time, or he's the only one that jumps out?
I don't know how many people worked under him, but what's interesting is he had an opponent, Rosenthal was, Rosenau, whatever his last name is. But that guy was too blunt. He would come out and say, I hate Jews. This guy was the way he maneuvered it politically, like I said, he wouldn't particularly target Russian people. He would say, go against commissars. So the Russian people will defect and fight the communists. So the way he came out about it, he would also benefit the state, and he would benefit. So this opponent of his would always cause him problems, So at one point he wasn't, Hitler liked him. At one point he didn't like him. So obviously he was in charge of many people. He was in charge of radio, movies, leaflets. He had the whole. He said he ran the most efficient government you can think of. Every minute was accounted for. So there was a big team that he wanted to run, and he would wake up early in the morning. You go sleep late at night. It was the most efficient. He said he was a fanatic. He was incredibly. He was a workhorse fanatic, basically, and anybody that worked under him said that is unbelievable. So he must have a lot of people working for him to be this efficient. I don't know the number, Andrew. Sorry.
But certainly, he is not. Propaganda was used by other countries as well. Maybe not not so openly admitting that this is the propaganda. But yeah, we know in Soviet Union there was a propaganda. I mean, it was called the Great Patriotic War, and there was music created for it with the right words, very profound. There is a lot of propaganda going that everyone has to participate. We have to really defend the blood, things like that. So they also use. I just wonder why France didn't do this thing. They could have resisted more. Yeah, they made a deal. I guess.
Right. He created a radio that was broadcasted. Like, you guys are familiar with Russian TV, RT. So he created a radio that broadcast Nazi ideology throughout the world in 24 languages. So the radio would broadcast as much as it could all over the world, in, let's say, Farsi, which is, Iranian language, in German, in English, in French, all over the world. And people start believing in this Nazi ideology. He wanted to bring everybody in so that they could buy into his ideology. It wasn't just Germany, And then when he was burning all the books, they weren't just German books. There were French writers, there were English writers. Everyone that didn't meet his they were better than him as a writer, first of all, or they were, communist, or they were not following the ideology of, or they were Jewish, he would burn. I mean, and not just talking about the books, Sigmund Freud was, banned. Albert Einstein was thrown out of the country. And what did Hitler said about Albert Einstein? We don't want this pig in our house. The smartest person in the entire 20th century was called a stupid pig by Hitler. Like, if that doesn't give you a cause for concern, and people didn't raise flags. They were like, what are you talking about? And this guy created a chain reaction. And how do you call this guy a stupid pig? I don't get that. So that it was, a truth said million times, a lie repeated 1,000 times becomes a truth. And he was able to be a master of that. This sickly human being who was rejected as probably in high school and, as a student, and then, joined the ideology of hatred because he hated everybody. And, 6 million Jews later, that, he is particularly involved in, Final Solution. Here we go. And then he dies as a coward, and then also commits a, massacre of his own kids. This is crazy. I don't know. And how can anybody as a person do that?
Yeah, I mean, one of the books that I mentioned earlier, Ordinary Men, it's about 20 years old, and it was by, I'll remember his name in a minute, but he references often in the book these experiments at Stanford of when people were given there was a pretend situation where somebody was giving somebody else a electric shock, and they managed to persuade people to give electric shocks. Of course, they weren't real electric shocks. There was an actor on the other side. And it's a very grim picture of human psychology.
Yeah, I mean, it was interesting when he was talking about the I don't know if anybody saw the movie Eternal Jew documentary that he put out, that showing the Jews were, you know, Untermensch, or the people that were not worth of leaving, because he went to Poland ghetto and he said, look, they live in filth, and they don't, you know, follow the society norms, and then he wrote his famous speech where he said, you know, basically what we're doing to Jews is very cruel, but they deserve it. He wrote, they deserve it. I was like, how could you say something like that? This is just, he just basically treated people like nothing. He didn't care, you know, he didn't care. It was just, you know, means to the, you know, to his end, you know. Anybody else any questions? Benson, Susan, Lan, Rama?
Yeah, please.
Nope, no questions. I'm enjoying it. Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I you know what, everything else, like, we can read the books. I just wanted to bring something that people didn't know a lot about him, you know. Want to give something, like, throw a controversy here and there. But if you guys around, tomorrow we have another one, 4 o'clock, Israeli 11 Wars. And we're going to talk about the, we're going to start with a Maccabean revolt against Ptolemy, you know, Ptolemy of Egypt, and all the way to the 1973 war. So if anybody wants to join, tomorrow at 4. And next week we have a history of gunpowder. So we switch around. And then history of Nubia, ancient Nubia, next week. And also, if anybody wants to, we do a sports section. There's going to be history of parasailing or sailing, American Cup, which is going to be presented by Anne. So if there's no more questions, I'm going to let everybody else go. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and we'll see you tomorrow, or if
Thank
not,
you.
whenever. Thank you, guys. Have a nice
Bye.
Thank you.
Zach.
Thank you again. I'll see you later.
Great.
Bye-bye.